and Erickson. You are listening to The Movie Raid.
It's time for the movie raid, and tonight's victim is film editor Ethan Erickson, that is currently involved with a film called Crowbar. Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
What have we been up to this month so far?
Got all the exports done for all the festivals, the digital cinema package, the DCP for cinemas. Got the surround mix in there, and then we just had a test screening day before yesterday, I believe, to make sure it all looks and sounds good, and signed off on it. So film is complete, ready to be shipped out.
Wow, that's actually pretty cool, because last I heard that they were still finishing up on some of the stuff. I mean, how long has this actually been going on for you, working on this project? Like a couple months, or?
Since about early November is when I came onto the project, starting the rough cut and then going forward into, all the different reviews and revisions and cut downs and cutting the trailer and then sending it off to audio, come back, getting all the mastering done. After getting the end, I'd say from early November till Monday.
Wow, so it was like a straightforward thing. I mean, was it a lot of hours for you specifically? I mean, was it like a straightforward type thing for you, or were you actually able to take a break and then come back for it?
I'd say the biggest break was when I got done with the final cut and I sent it off for audio and composing, basically sending off all the audio to Slider and Den to do all the mixing and basically creating final mix and surround sound out of it, and then also sending off to Jeff Chambers for his composing. So that was my little break in between, and then once I got all that back, it was quite a few more hours kind of putting all the pieces together, lining up the color with all the audio, and then getting all the different exports, because basically when I hand it off the project, I want to make sure that the director has every possible type of export, whether it's like an MP4, .C64 kind of export for kind of every computer for online stuff, and then also for the digital cinema package, which is the export for theaters.
Now, do you work exclusively like with smaller budget films? I mean, is it easier for you specifically, or are you basically a freelance guy and whichever work comes your way?
Well, currently, I work full-time editing for Amazon. I'm a full-time editor doing a whole bunch of social and online pieces mostly, do pre-roll for YouTube, basically just, commercial stuff all around. And then on the side, I do like projects like this, kind of more like passion projects, music videos, narratives, short films, stuff like that. This is the longest film I believe I've edited, and I'm trying to get back into doing more narrative work. I graduated from the Art Institute in 2015. And when I was going to school there, receiving my BA, I turned out a few dozen short films and ideas, writing and directing and editing and everything, until I kind of fell into my role as an editor and realized that's what I wanted to do. So after kind of turning it out through the commercial world and stuff, I kind of want to get back into the narrative world. And so this project is one of those projects that I kind of came back to that kind of work, and it's been a good process, and it's been nice to kind of have that different mindset, changing from commercial work to narrative work.
Now, working with this particular type of film, whether it's big budget, low budget, or you like you do with commercials, is time more crucial as far as the working time working with the independent films? Is the time more crucial for you as well as time expectancy?
Yeah, commercial work is basically very time dependent, because you have to hit a deadline. If you don't hit that deadline, product doesn't go out, and that's a problem for not just you and the director. It's a problem for a client, problem for a team, problem for everybody. So that's very time sensitive, to where almost every minute of every day is kind of timed out. Say with the narrative piece, you have definitely more time to experiment with and kind of go back and forth and review things and stuff like that. It's more like a deadline that you have to hit in order to get your final cut done, so that you can hand it off to get all the color and audio stuff, that kind of stuff done. I try to set up definitely like a schedule for myself, to where I get the rough cut done with this date, and we have a review, and then I can do some changes and stuff like that. But it does give you free up a little bit more time working on a narrative piece, because you really need time to sit with the footage and the script and the performances in order to find the story, because you can have all the clips and you can have all the circle takes about which performances work best or which shot they like best, but you really have to kind of look at it with a new kind of objective perspective, so that you can really put the best story forward. So with the narrative piece, you have some more time, but it's definitely like a crunch, because in that time that you have to get a lot done. So.
Yeah, does this particular job become more important when it comes to local work or even small budget film in general?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those things where a lot of people, they can edit, or I've known some people that are directors or writers, and they end up editing their own pieces, but they're not necessarily editors, and you could kind of see it in the final product, because basically, if you're working in the industry and you're working, especially if you're working commercial and stuff, and you're churning out a lot of pieces, you get really fast at getting the stuff done that needs to get done, that you have time to fit with the project to make it the best piece possible. So I feel like, director, cinematographer, editor, gaffer, sound person, I feel like each key role is extremely important. And, you hear a lot of talk about this day and age, like, oh, our cinematographer is going to be replaced because of, computer-controlled cameras, or editor is going to be replaced because of algorithms and stuff like that. And in the end, there's always that human element. And you can make a piece, okay, and people will notice and not really be engaged with the story, or you can make a piece great and that will engage your audience better. And I honestly believe the only way to make a piece great is to have each role defined and a professional doing each role, or else something's going to slip through the cracks and not be as good as it could possibly be. A lot of people will think that independent might think, cheap. And budget-wise and money-wise, yeah, that's pretty true, but it doesn't mean that the talent itself is cheap. Like, I work in the commercial industry and I have a pretty good portfolio and have a good rate and everything, but I took on this film not to, make an extra buck. I took on this film because I thought the true story was really interesting and an interesting perspective, and I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to basically jump into a project, my perspective and my spin on and stuff. And yeah, and it was interesting. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of kind of figuring out the best way to tell a story. And I think that a big part of being an editor is that you have to not just putting the clips on a timeline or in a sequence. It's figuring out the best way to tell a story to an audience. And in order to do that, you have to be able to basically have a bunch of different kinds of views. You have to look at it from a pacing perspective and rhythm. You have to look for the sound. You have to look for the best performances and the best cinematography. And you're never going to get all of those things, or rarely get all of those things in the same scene or same shot. You have to compromise a lot and say, this shot is absolutely beautiful, but this performance or the way the actor said this line works better for the whole scene. And so you have to see what you have to sacrifice, and in the end you also have to be able to turn a switch in your brain and say, okay, now I'm out of editor mode and I'm out of filmmaker mode and now I'm in audience mode. And you have to watch it as an audience member because you're kind of the last, at the end of the funnel, you're the last person between everybody else and the people watching the movie. So you have to be able to kind of switch your brain to that mode because in the end, you can edit it really well and it can be directed well and written well, but if you can't watch it as a viewer, as an audience member, then you're not going to get their perspective. And it's really interesting because, you can have all these elements working well together, but it just doesn't click for an audience member, and you have to go back and rethink what you're doing.
Do you think working with these elements, do you think sometimes the element themselves can actually overlap the overall design of the film itself?
Yeah. I think basically story is driven by conflict, and your conflict is basically your characters hitting up against the theme, and so that you have to have this kind of thread that runs through the whole story. And because if you don't have that thread, then there's, people aren't going to want to follow from one scene to the next. So I think, as an editor, I'll sit down and I will try to figure out a scene, and I will spend hours and hours trying to figure it out and trying different shots and trying this. I need to cut something out or put something in or a reaction shot or something like that, and I can be done with that scene and then go back and watch it with the entirety of the rest of the film and realize that it doesn't work with the rest of the film. Like, that scene alone works and it cuts well together, but with the balance of the rest of the film, it doesn't. And so you have to go back and you have to cut to that. It's a little frustrating at times because you have to be thinking about the micro and the macro at the same time. That's editing. It's not just one shot. It's not just one scene. It's a whole piece made up of these individual things. And you have to think about the details in between each shot and each scene. And so it's just about revision because, you're never going to get something the first time and you're not going to get it the second time. And then even after you're done and think it's great, you'll show it to the director or you'll show it to somebody else and get their perspective on it and realize that you were wrong, or there's a different perspective that you can be looking at it from. So it's an interesting process to go through, but in the end, you're there to serve the story. If you're just, putting pieces together and they're not making sense, then you're not doing your job right. So you have to kind of think about everything involved, not just how it's cut. You have to think about how the characters work with each other and how the theme runs through the story and how those characters work with that theme. And it's almost like writing a story in the editing bay because you have to keep all those things present in the back of your mind, because if you aren't serving those characters, serving that theme or serving that story, then you're just putting clips together.
Yeah, when it's like looking at a storybook that has pictures, okay? Maybe you're not going to read the story. Maybe you're just going to look at the pictures. Or maybe if you look at one picture, but you flipped the next 2 pages, now you don't understand the entire story at all.
Yeah, exactly.
But do you think there's just less consideration when it comes to a lot of films that do that? Do you think they consider it as much, even though it is a job, yes, but you are the editor, you're editing these pieces, but like the lighting, the coloring of each scene, I mean, it is going to affect overall. It's not just going to affect you, it's going to affect everybody, because the director's going to be really mad at you. I mean, probably the company itself is probably going to be mad at you because you let this be a final product, and because at the end, you yourself are a critic as well, because this is a piece of art. You know, director is the critic, just like as an actor, they're their own critic at the end. I mean, this is your call at the end.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, with everything else, you're definitely like a piece of the puzzle, and they're all integral pieces. But if you have a big puzzle put together and you're missing that last piece, then no one's going to want to look at that puzzle. No one's going to want to look at that picture. So you have a kind of lot riding on your shoulders as an editor because you're that last piece. And it's also working with directors that are pretty trusting of their editors. They can sit down with you and, well, you can see it. You can see it on the screen. You can see it in the reactions of the audience.
A lot of these big companies that have such a big budget, and they want to make it so fancy, so pretty, so crisp and everything, but it's almost like trying to distract us from actually looking at what we should be looking at. We need to see the story. We need to see all the works of the lighting guy, the cinema, everybody that was involved within any project in terms of film, because what's the point in having any of these guys on here on this extremely large budget if you're only going to use just the technology for the CGI and anything else just to make it look pretty?
If it's not serving the story, then it's not working. It's not doing its job, and that goes for any person working on it or any piece of technology that's involved with the film. Basically, you can have $100 million, $200 million budget movie, and if the CG is not, engaging the audience and pushing them further into a character's development or arc, or pushing them further into the story in a meaningful way, then you spent $200 million on nothing. Because you can do the same thing on an iPhone. I mean, you could make a film on an iPhone, and if it's an engaging and gripping story with good characters, and it's done with the right kind of writing and filmmaking, then you can engage somebody more than a 5-minute cell phone video than you can in a 2-hour-long CG blockbuster. You should always be serving the story, serving the characters. If you're not doing that, then it doesn't work. Doesn't matter what kind of budget or technology you have.
Yeah, always like that. And go ahead and plug in anything that you'd like to promote, any websites, any release dates, anything that's been released this year or even last year that you've been involved with, and so forth and so forth.
Well, just finished Crowbar, and that's going to be shipped out to, I think they have over 90 festivals now funded, going to be all over the world. And then just finished a music video for a band called Automotive Steam Horse. Their album will be releasing soon, and their first music video will be releasing, and I did the editing on that. And then I'm currently working on a short film of my own that I wrote and directed. I'll be editing. Sarah Muslin is the DP on there, and we'll be shooting that in the beginning of May, and I'll probably be releasing that towards the end of the year. It's kind of like a very short sci-fi thriller, and it's going to be called Echoes. And other than that, just continuing my work. If you want to check out any of my work, I have a website, ethanjerickson.com.